Chapter 14, The Proposal from JE2US-A Novel. Jesus disappeared after that, vanished. He told none of us where he was going other than that he needed to spend some time with his father. I guess we assumed he had gone up to Ely, but the media had sent trucks and vans and bloodhounds to sniff him out. No one had found him. The weeks flew by. Our fearless leader had spawned multiple TV shows. Some were celebrity gossip formats, some religiously based, and some were scientific studies on his miracles. It's time for How Did Jesus Do That? The studio audience mimicked. Another was called The Jesus Chronicles. They interviewed anybody willing to tell a Jesus story. And there were thousands of them, some true, some ridiculous fabrications. His absence seemed to just heighten the public's curiosity about him. They couldn't get enough. The tribe gained its own notoriety in his absence. Some of us liked it, others not so much. Bartholomew didn't give good interviews. I felt for him because he became the butt of their jokes. Here's one of Jesus' followers. Tell us, sir, what's the story with Jesus? He stammered and twitched and mumbled random nonsense. It made us all look stupid. Judas went back to taking bets, but now he added fun Jesus-themed wagers, like what's the over-under on Jesus running for mayor, winning, Jesus beating Sebastian in a fist fight, Jesus starting a new religion, Jesus starting a television network. I think Judas' intention was to try to talk Jesus into all these things when he returned, making a killing off it. By the way, Simon had already started a line of Jesus Rides skateboard clothing, mostly t-shirts with Jesus mug all over them. Rosalita went back to the city council, Andrew went back to hauling people's trash, Tom to his printing biz, Jude to his CPA firm, Bartholomew to his cardboard box under the Lake Street Marshall Avenue Bridge. I went back to med school. Maddie went back to work for the governor, full-time. After Jesus had been gone a week, the governor sent troops to round her up. Playtime was over. James and John went back to playing gigs, but on the side they were scheming with Peter. I heard they were meeting with faction groups from the Brotherhood and were planning some guerrilla attacks on various government and religious targets. I ran into Simon on the street one day and he told me that Peter had bought a new gun. He had showed it to Simon. It was an old Browning that the French had referred to as the grande puissance, which meant higher power. Right before Jesus disappeared, he and Peter had had a run-in. Peter had gone to him and reasoned that the only way to see significant permanent change was to force our government and the religious elite to respect us. Jesus had said he intended to sacrifice himself in an offering of love. Peter, as if educating Jesus, had shot back in frustration. Respect is not casually handed over to those who threaten with love. Peter had said it with a tone a tad too harsh. You have to take it, Jesus. Sometimes you have to demand things, using force for the cause of good. Peter was sure that Jesus would understand his logic, but Jesus had lost his temper with him. Get away from me. You want control, Peter, but that's not why I've come. Now leave. The longer Jesus was gone, the more that episode ate at Peter. It's funny, in Jesus' absence, our tribe had very little in common. We certainly had no direction or purpose to hold us together. I did miss my time with the gang, but mostly I missed being with Jesus. It really had felt like we were onto something that might just change everything. But in 5 or 6 weeks since he had disappeared, I was starting to wonder if I had really seen those miracles. Were those real people, real miracles? Were they really healed? It felt like I had been cast in a blockbuster action movie and now was being relegated to my trailer. Then one day, my agent called. It was Jesus. He was back. Get the tribe together, he said. We've got things to do. It didn't take much to ramp up the crew. Even though they had gone back to their old lives, they were wishing and hoping for the re-entry of their director. The slightest whisper of his return would have brought them running. We met him in front of the Falafel King on 7th and Lake. He had just popped what was left of the deep-fried mashed chickpeas into his mouth as we approached. He came running when he saw us. "You don't know how I've missed you all," he said as he threw his arms around each one of us. Maddie jumped in his arms and wrapped her legs around him. Judas shook his hand. Simon proudly showed him his t-shirt. James picked him up in a bear hug, and I saw a trace of a tear in John's eye. Jesus held Bartholomew's face in his hands, full eye contact. If I'm not mistaken, I think I saw the hint of a smile on Bartholomew. Peter held Jesus for a long time. Through the healing hug, Jesus felt the replaced gun that Peter had tucked under his belt, but he didn't say anything. Jesus hooked his hand behind my neck and pulled my forehead right up against his. He looked at me and tenderly said, "I've missed you, Philip. How are you, my friend?" I'll never forget that moment. He then turned and started skipping down Lake Street. This was my favorite Jesus mood. Playful, happy, carefree. It seemed the weeks away had done him good. He was like a new person. "Damn, it's good to be back," he said. He laughed the words out of his mouth and said, "So, our time is getting short. We've got a lot of work to do. I have so many things I want to teach you before I leave." Leave? He just got back. What's he talking about? John asked the question. "But you just got here, Jesus. Why would you leave again?" "I have to be about my Father's business. But don't worry. When I leave, I'm sending a replacement. You won't be alone." Maddie said it. "But we don't want a replacement. We want you." Jesus just smiled. Then, again walking backwards down the sidewalk, said, "The kingdom of heaven is all around us, kids. Do you see it? Everything speaks of my Father's love for you and your role in his plan. Everything. I dare you, name something and I'll show you how it tells the good story." We were walking by the front of Clancy's meat market at the moment. Through the window, we could see one of the butchers wielding a meat cleaver, parsing out precise cuts. Simon said with a smirk, "Tell us how cuts of meat are like the kingdom of heaven, Jesus." Without a pause, he said, "You are the kingdom herd. Some of you are ribeyes, some are pot roasts, and some are filet mignons. Some of you are marbled, and some a bit tough to chew," he laughed. "You all have a role. You all have your skills, but it takes all of us to make a cow. You can stack 100 pot roasts in a pile, and they can never give you milk, butter, or cream. It takes all of us together. If we want to be that righteous cow we were intended to be." Then turning back and walking, "Stick together, you tasty sides of beef." "Next," he shouted the challenge. "Time. What does time teach us about the kingdom of heaven?" asked Rosalita, looking at the empty space on her wrist. "Patience and time do more than strength or passion." "Next, parking meters. Time is short, people. Swipe your grace card or you'll be towed. Darkness has a fleet of 1,000,000 tow trucks with engines idling, just itching to drag your chassis as far from me as possible. But if you swipe, I'll guarantee you an eternal space on my boulevard." "Grace card?" asked Judas. "More on that later." Next, Jesus was on a roll and wanted to keep moving. "Traffic lights." Said Jesus. "Stop, start, stop judging, start loving." "What about the yellow light, Jesus?" Maddie asked. "Everybody knows the answer to that. It means step on the gas." The crowd doubled every 5 minutes. The game continued. "Coffee," someone yelled. Don't fall asleep spiritually. Keep a mug of my love in your hand at all times. In fact, carry a thermos and share it. My kindness is caffeine. It will wake the world up to goodness. The aroma of my freshly ground grace will open your weary eyes, and one sip of my dark roast mercy will stock your cells with joy. "Dark roast mercy? Really?" asked Jude sarcastically. Keep a healthy spiritual buzz, my friends, said Jesus, ignoring the question. Dogs, someone yelled. Eternal acceptance. Cats. Eternal rejection, he laughed. McDonald's. A guy pulls up to a drive-thru in heaven. The box squawks, what'll you have? Guy says, quarter pounder a piece of mind. Hold the onions. She says, done. The guy says, really? You serve peace of mind sans onions? Girl says, yep. And have you tried our love your neighbor as yourself Happy Meal? Heavenly. Guy says, wow, I'm loving this. Staying on the food train, someone yelled, hot dogs. You might think you are nothing but leftover meat, extraneous cuts, throwaway clippings, but when you let me spice you up, slather you with my special sauce, and wrap you in my love, you become a delicacy, savored by friends and admired by enemies. Oh, and people in ballparks will literally eat you up. The game continued. A good cigar, a great companion on a golf course of life. But choose carefully what you inhale. It can leave you with nasty breath in the morning. Wine. Character transformation takes a long time to ferment. Can't rush it. But if you let me do the work, you will be aged to perfection. You will become a good year from bad circumstances. A bouquet of wisdom blossoming from years in the woodshed. How is yoga like the kingdom of heaven, Jesus? Jesus stopped, went into a standing pose, arms stretched toward heaven. He was silent for 15 seconds, then said, be still, stop and reflect, spend time with my Father, get to know his voice, learn to feel the nudging of the Spirit, slow down. The fastest road to maturity is not a shortcut through self-help land, but a disciplined detour through extended silence, listening for the whisper of my voice. Pawn shop, said Peter as they passed Uptown Pawn. Jesus pulled the tribe through the door and walked up to the guy behind the counter. Do you take trades? The guy gave him a look that said, duh, do you know where you are, buddy? Then Jesus turned to Peter and said, can I have your gun, Peter? Peter looked away in exasperation, mumbling to himself, not again. He made no move to retrieve the gun. Jesus stepped up to him, looked him in the eye and said, do you trust me, Peter? Peter shrugged. Jesus continued, do you believe that I will do nothing except that which is good for you, that which will make you a better person? Peter kind of nodded. Jesus held out his hand again. The gun. Peter agonizingly retrieved the semi-automatic from under his belt and delivered over his second firearm to a man who made them disappear. Jesus took it and began examining it. He popped the clip, fully loaded. He ran his finger around the wood-engraved handle. This is a nice gun, Peter. He looked up at the guy behind the counter as if to say, this baby is worth some serious dollars. The guy behind the counter took a step back, unsure as to whether this was a transaction or a heist. Jesus then noticed an engraving on the barrel that said, justice for all. Jesus nodded, appreciating the heart of a man who cared for those unable to fight for themselves. You're a good man, Peter, he said. Then he turned to the guy behind the counter. I kind of hate to trade such a fine piece of craftsmanship, but I really need that. He pointed the gun at a beautiful diamond ring inside a jewel case. Peter's eyes grew like saucers, as did all of ours. Jesus slid the gun across the counter and was handed the ring. Jesus turned to Peter, holding out the ring so that he could see it. The kingdom of heaven is achieved through the most unlikely of measures. It doesn't come by force. It doesn't come by power. It arrives one loving act of kindness at a time. I have pawned my power to be with you. I have traded my authority to become your servant. And I have done all this for my love of you. He held the ring up so we all could see it. I would like to make a proposal. Looking around from face to face, he very deliberately said, I, Jesus, take you, Peter. Then to James he said, I, Jesus, take you, James. And he continued, John, Matty, Philip, Bartholomew, Judas, Andrew, Simon, Rosalita, Tom, Jude. He went around the whole circle. I take you to be my bride, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, from now until the end of time. There was a long silence when he finished. It was a bit awkward. Do we say vows back to him? Who does this kind of stuff? I heard Maddie under her breath say, I do. Jesus then took the ring and placed it in Peter's palm and wrapped Peter's fingers around it. Then with a sparkle in his eye, he said, now, my recommendation to you, Peter, is to slide this on Susie's finger and marry the hell out of her. Cheers erupted from the tribe. Peter blushed, but the breadth of his grin betrayed his intentions. He walked out the door of the pawn shop without casting a backward glance toward his gun. As we walked down the street, Bartholomew, in the most deadpan of voices, chanted, Peter and Susie sitting in a tree, Kissing, first comes